She teleported into my shower, looked me over, and stayed. The day had started like any other. The morning sun was just beginning to peek through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. The protagonist, someone who lived a simple life, felt the familiar comfort of routine as they moved through the motions of the day. They had just stepped into the shower, the warm water running down their back, soothing the last remnants of sleep away. The sound of the water pouring, the steam filling the air, was calming. It was peaceful, ordinary, or so it seemed. But in a blink, everything changed. The moment the water splashed against their face, the world around them seemed to twist. The air grew thick with confusion. At first, it was just a sensation, something in the air that didn't feel quite right. But when they opened their eyes, the scene before them was something entirely out of the ordinary. A woman, standing right there in the shower with them. She was unfamiliar, her presence both unexpected and completely out of place. The protagonist froze, unable to process the situation. Their mind raced, trying to figure out how this could be possible. Was this some sort of dream? A hallucination, perhaps? They looked around frantically, half expecting to see someone behind them, ready to laugh and tell them it was a prank, but no one else was there. It was just them and the woman. The woman stood quietly, her gaze taking in her surroundings, almost as though she, too, was trying to understand where she was. She didn't say anything at first, just staring at the walls of the shower as if they were somehow new to her. The protagonist couldn't bring themselves to speak at first. It wasn't just the shock of her sudden appearance, but also the sheer oddity of it all. How could this have happened? Who was she? And why was she in their shower? For a long moment, neither of them moved. It felt like time had stopped. The sound of water falling against the tiles seemed louder in the silence, almost as if it were the only thing anchoring them to reality. The protagonist's mind was racing, asking questions faster than they could process them. What is going on? Is this real? Am I dreaming? Then the woman shifted slightly, her gaze now turning to meet theirs. Her eyes were calm, almost as though she expected something like this to happen. The protagonist opened their mouth to speak, but the woman beat them to it. Her voice was soft but clear, cutting through the thick silence that had settled between them. "I didn't mean to end up here," she said, her words catching the protagonist completely off guard. "I wasn't expecting this. Not here, not now." The simplicity of her words somehow made the situation even more baffling. She didn't seem confused or frightened like the protagonist. Instead, she appeared calm, as if she had dealt with this kind of thing before. The protagonist blinked, unsure of how to respond. "Who are you?" "What are you doing here?" they finally managed to ask, their voice shaky, unsure if they could even trust what was happening. "I'm not from here," she said softly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The words didn't make sense to the protagonist at first. What did she mean by that? The silence between them grew heavier, and the protagonist's mind tried to grasp what was happening. Was this some kind of illusion? A figment of their imagination? Could this be a prank gone too far? The protagonist took a step back, still keeping their distance, unsure of how to proceed. But the woman didn't move, her gaze steady and curious, as if she were waiting for something, perhaps an invitation, an understanding that they were both in this strange moment together. "I don't know how this happened," she continued, her voice almost like a whisper now. "One moment, I was somewhere else, and then I ended up here, in your world." The protagonist stared at her, their mind struggling to comprehend what she had just said. Somewhere else? What did that mean?
"Where are you from?" they asked, their voice a little steadier now, though they still felt the weight of the situation pressing on them. The woman didn't answer immediately, her eyes drifting as though she were searching for the right words.
"I can't explain it all," she said after a moment, her voice carrying a mix of both sadness and regret. "But wherever I'm from, it's not this place. And somehow, I've ended up here, with you." The words hung in the air between them, and for a long time, the only sound was the constant flow of water, still streaming down, though it now felt like it had somehow lost its warmth. The protagonist blinked again, trying to make sense of it all. A woman who was not from this world, standing in their shower. They wanted to ask more questions, but words seemed to fail them. What did she mean by somewhere else? What did it all mean? And more importantly, what was supposed to happen next? The woman stepped forward, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she were still uncertain of her surroundings. The protagonist, still overwhelmed by the situation, instinctively took a step back, not sure what to make of her proximity. But the woman didn't seem threatening, just lost. She looked at them once more, a hint of apology in her eyes, though she still said nothing.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do, she admitted, her voice low but calm. I didn't ask for this.
But now that I'm here, I just need to understand it. To understand you and how this works. The protagonist could hardly believe what they were hearing. And yet, something about the woman's presence felt oddly comforting. It was as though there was an unspoken bond forming between them, despite the absurdity of the situation. She was from somewhere else, somewhere beyond their understanding. And yet, she wasn't afraid. And for some strange reason, the protagonist didn't feel afraid either. The surreal nature of the situation was starting to feel less surreal. They swallowed, their thoughts still in disarray. But one thing was clear. Whatever was happening, they couldn't ignore it. And somehow, this woman, this stranger, had entered their life in the most impossible way. They weren't sure what was coming next, but they knew this moment, however strange it was only the beginning. The woman didn't move from her spot, but her eyes, which had been scanning the room and the protagonist, softened. There was something oddly calming about her, despite how strange the situation was. The protagonist felt a mixture of curiosity and confusion, their thoughts racing as they tried to process everything. This woman, this person who had appeared out of nowhere, was now standing before them, speaking in a way that seemed so genuine, so real, that it made it difficult to believe that she wasn't from this world. She had said she wasn't from here, but what did that even mean? Was she from another country? Another planet? Or was she referring to a different time? A different reality entirely? The protagonist wasn't sure, but they knew they needed answers. They couldn't just stand there staring at each other in silence. "Where do you come from?" the protagonist asked again, their voice quieter this time, as if they didn't want to disturb the fragile calm that had settled between them. The woman didn't respond right away. Instead, she seemed to be carefully choosing her words, as though the answer she gave would be crucial. "I can't tell you everything," she said, after a long pause. "But I can tell you that I'm not from this place, not like you. I don't know how it happened, but I ended up here, and I don't know how to get back, or if I can get back at all." The uncertainty in her voice struck a chord with the protagonist. This wasn't some far-fetched story or an elaborate lie. This was real. This woman wasn't just lost in a physical sense. She seemed to be lost in a much deeper way, in a way that the protagonist could feel, even if they didn't fully understand it. "So, you're stuck here?" the protagonist asked, their voice barely above a whisper. She nodded slowly, her gaze steady but filled with a strange sadness. "I guess so. But I'm not upset about it. Not really. Being here with you feels different. It feels like I'm supposed to be here, in some way I don't quite understand yet." The words echoed in the protagonist's mind. They felt the weight of her honesty, and it made them realize something they hadn't considered before. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a random event. Maybe there was something more to it. Maybe the universe, in all its unpredictability, had brought her here for a reason. The silence stretched between them again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence where both of them were thinking, processing. The water continued to fall, a soft sound in the background, the only thing that seemed constant in an otherwise impossible moment. "How are you so calm about all this?" the protagonist finally asked, their eyes searching hers. "If I were in your shoes, I don't know how I'd handle it." She smiled, though it was a small, bittersweet smile. "I don't know either. I guess it's just the way things are. I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but I'm not afraid. Not anymore." The protagonist felt a shift in themselves, a small but noticeable change in the way they looked at the situation. There was something about her calm, her acceptance of the unknown, that made them reconsider their own fears. The unknown was scary, yes, but it was also full of possibilities, and maybe, just maybe, this was an opportunity to explore those possibilities. "I don't understand it," the protagonist admitted. "I don't know what you mean about not being from here, but I'm not scared of you. I'm just confused. But I'll help you. If you want to stay, if you need help, I'll figure something out." The woman's eyes softened even more. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I didn't expect to find someone so willing to help." "I thought I'd be alone in this." "You're not alone," the protagonist said firmly. "I don't know what this means, but I'm here. We'll figure it out together." As they spoke, the atmosphere between them began to shift. The fear and confusion that had initially filled the room now seemed to dissipate. It was replaced with a quiet understanding, an unspoken bond that was starting to form. The protagonist had no idea what was happening or where it was leading, but they knew one thing. They couldn't just turn their back on this, not when it felt like this woman, this stranger, was somehow meant to be here. The woman nodded, as if she understood the significance of their words. "Thank you," she repeated, her voice soft. "I don't know how long I'll be here, but I'm glad I found you." There was a moment of shared silence, and in that moment, the protagonist realized something. This woman wasn't just lost. She was a part of something bigger, something the protagonist was now a part of, too. They didn't know what it meant yet, but they could sense that the universe had brought them together for a reason, and whatever that reason was, they were ready to face it, together. Days passed, and life slowly began to adjust to the strange new reality. The woman, who had appeared so suddenly, had become a part of the protagonist's world in ways that were still hard to understand. They spent more time together, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Though the protagonist still had many questions, there was no hurry to find the answers. They were learning to live with the uncertainty, accepting that some things couldn't be explained right away. They began to talk more, the woman sharing what little she knew about her origins. It wasn't much, just fragments of memories, moments from her past that didn't quite fit together. She described a world unlike the protagonist's, a place where things were different, where the rules of reality didn't always apply. It sounded strange, almost impossible, but the protagonist listened, not questioning her words. After all, what was reality really? Wasn't everything about perception? About what one believed to be true? At night, they would sit together in the quiet of the room, talking about anything and everything. The woman seemed to have a wealth of knowledge about the world, but it wasn't knowledge of this world. It was something deeper, something that hinted at the mysteries of the universe. She spoke of distant places, of things that sounded like stories from an old legend, things that were beyond the grasp of the protagonist's understanding. And yet, the more they listened, the more they felt that this was all part of a greater truth, that they were slowly starting to uncover. It wasn't easy adjusting to this new reality. There were moments of doubt, moments when the protagonist wondered if they were making a mistake, or if they had imagined it all. But the woman was always there, steady and calm, reminding them that they weren't alone in this. She was with them, and that was all that mattered. As the days turned into weeks, something else began to change. The bond between them grew stronger, deeper. It wasn't romantic, at least not in the traditional sense. It was something more profound, something that went beyond what words could express. They didn't need to understand everything. Some things were better left unexplained, but the connection they shared was real, and that was enough. One evening, as they sat on the couch, watching the sunset through the window, the protagonist turned to the woman and smiled. "I still don't know what's going on," they said, "but I'm glad you're here. I can't imagine what it would be like without you." The woman smiled back, her eyes soft. "I feel the same way," she said. "I didn't expect any of this, but I'm glad it happened. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm not afraid. As long as I'm with you, I know we'll be okay." The sunset bathed the room in a soft golden light, and for the first time in a long while, the protagonist felt at peace. They didn't know where this journey was leading, but they knew they were no longer alone. Together, they would face whatever came next, no matter how uncertain or impossible it seemed. The future, with all its mysteries, was theirs to discover. The days turned into weeks, and each day seemed to bring something new, something different. The woman, who had appeared out of nowhere, had become more than just a stranger in the protagonist's life. She had become a companion, someone who, despite all the mysteries she brought with her, made the world feel less lonely. It was as if her arrival had broken down the walls of routine and opened the door to something bigger, something unknown. As time passed, the protagonist found themselves thinking less about how strange everything was and more about how much they had come to rely on her presence. In a way, she had changed everything. The once dull, predictable days were now filled with new discoveries, conversations, and the warmth of a connection that neither of them had expected, but both of them embraced. They had explored each other's worlds in a way that felt natural. But the woman shared stories from where she came from, though much of it still seemed distant and hard to grasp. She spoke of a place where time wasn't always linear, where the sky looked different, and where the rules of the universe seemed more fluid. But she never went into too much detail, just enough to hint at the vastness of the unknown, and to make the protagonist realize how little they knew about the universe around them. It was humbling, but it was also, there was so much more to explore, so much more to understand. The protagonist in turn shared their life with her, the things they loved, the small details that made up their world. They showed her their favorite spots in the city, took her to quiet parks where the world seemed to slow down, and spent long evenings talking about everything and nothing. There were moments of laughter, moments of silence, and moments when they both simply looked at each other and knew that something extraordinary had happened. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of uncertainty, times when the protagonist wondered if this was all just a dream or if something would change, pulling them apart. They still didn't fully understand what had happened or how the woman had come to be in their life. But in those moments, when doubt crept in, the woman was always there, steady and calm, reminding them that they didn't need to know everything right away. The uncertainty was part of the journey, and they would face it together. It wasn't always easy for the protagonist to accept that life could be this unpredictable. They were used to knowing what would happen next, following the patterns and routines of everyday life. But the more time they spent with the woman, the more they realized that life wasn't meant to be predictable. It wasn't meant to be safe or certain. The beauty of it was in its unpredictability, in the way unexpected moments could lead to something more meaningful than anything they could have planned. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, the protagonist and the woman sat on the couch, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange. There was a quiet contentment between them, a feeling that they were both in the right place at the right time, even if they didn't fully understand why. "Do you ever think about going back?" the protagonist asked, their voice soft, almost hesitant. They hadn't asked this question before, but now it felt like the right time. The woman looked at them, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes," she said, her voice quiet, "I think about the place I came from, about the people I knew. But I don't miss it the way I thought I would. I think that maybe, for now, This is where I'm supposed to be. The words hung in the air between them, and for the first time, the protagonist felt a deep understanding. This woman, who had been so mysterious and distant when they first met, was now as much a part of their life as anything else. She had found a place here, just as they had found a place in her world, however strange that world might have been. There was a stillness in the room, but it was the kind of stillness that felt peaceful, not uncomfortable. The world outside was busy, but here in this small space, time seemed to slow down. The protagonist realized that no matter what happened next, they had found something truly special. They had found someone who understood the value of simply being present, of sharing a moment without needing to have all the answers. They didn't know what the future held. They didn't know if the woman would stay, or if one day she would disappear, as mysteriously as she had arrived. But for the first time in a long time, the protagonist wasn't afraid of the unknown. They weren't afraid of what might come next. They were ready to face whatever the future held, together. And as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, the protagonist turned to the woman, their heart full with a quiet certainty. "I don't know what happens after this," they said, "but I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I met you." The woman smiled, her eyes soft and full of something unspoken. "I'm glad too," she said. "I didn't expect any of this, but now that I'm here, I wouldn't change it for anything." And in that moment, the protagonist knew that no matter what the future held, this was a moment they would remember. The unexpected had come into their life and changed everything, but in the most beautiful way. They had discovered that sometimes the most meaningful things were the ones that couldn't be explained, the ones that just happened. And as long as they had each other, they would face whatever came next with open hearts and open minds.